Hi everyone, thank you very much for coming. Can everyone hear okay? Headphones on, thumbs up? Well, thank you very much for coming. I know it's the last session. We do want to focus on, I think, a very important topic, but what I would like to do firstly though is introduce our fellow panelists. Barbara, perhaps you could introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. My name is Barbara Rogan, and I'm a Vice President and Associate General Counsel at Cadence Design System. We've been involved with contract management for at least 4 years at Cadence, and I'm very thrilled to be invited today to talk about vendors.
Thank you very much. And Mauro.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mauro Caputi. I'm a partner and co-founder of Mainspring Consulting Group. Mainspring is a professional services firm that focuses on the middle office, and in particular with emphasis on contracts lifecycle management, otherwise known as obviously CLM. I've been practicing CLM for close to 30 years now, and worked with a variety of different systems, probably close to 24 or so different systems, either migrating from or working and implementing and migrating to. So we have obviously a lot of insights to share within this next half hour. It's going to be difficult to contain all those insights between Ed, Barbara, and I within the half hour, so we certainly invite you to join us afterwards, one-on-one, after this session. But thanks for being here this afternoon.
Thank you, Mauro. I'm Edward Trick. I'm responsible for CLM at Apttus, and the reason we added this session is that we know that all our customers have a variety of other systems in place, other repositories, and they are always asking us and our partners, how can we do better with the broad inventory of materials we have, legal artifacts, other repositories, other applications. And so it's getting better and easier, but it still requires, we think, a lot of attention, and it's an important area of focus. So we thought we'd add this. We do know, of course, it's at the end of the session, so we're between you and happy hour, but having said that, we have some questions that we've prepared. I'm going to start with you, Barbara, if I may.
Sure.
So forgetting about technology for a second, just from a project management, good governance, best practices point of view, what have you discovered over the years?
One of the things that we've really discovered and looked at from a project management perspective is really understanding not only what you're currently doing today, but where you want to be going in the future, and building in sufficient time so you can develop your new systems and your contract management system to be really best in class, rather than just repeating what you happen to have, what's grown up over the years.
Had you typically, you've done a couple of conversions, right?
Yes, yeah, a number of conversions, yes.
And they were completely flawless and smooth and no problems whatsoever,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely, and we actually got to go home early every day. So actually, that's not a case, of course. But one of the things that when we did our conversion, we went from multiple vendors into a single vendor for our contract management system, and that was quite a challenge. And so there's some positives and some negatives. But the biggest thing that I would say that is most important when you're looking at a large project, such as taking multiple vendors and integrating into one, is really making sure that not only do you have enough time to do the actual integration work in the IT side, but on the business processes side, you have a really clear idea of where you want to go, what you want to measure, and how things can improve. I'd say that you need to spend almost as much time before talking with the IT team, getting your business processes in order to make sure that you have a successful project.
Yeah, we'll definitely return to the topic of changing business process at this moment, but did you, would you recommend running pilots or proof of concepts, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea. We've always done proof of concepts when we're doing a major change, especially in processes. You always think that you have a good idea of what's going to work and what people's objections are going to be, and every single time that I've run a pilot for a new process, somebody's come up with a problem that I didn't even think of. So, especially when you're looking at an enterprise, you don't want to migrate everybody to a flawed process. You definitely want to have a pilot, and you want to do a pilot with your most friendly users.
And did you run things in parallel and actually sort of replicate two environments or anything like that?
Yeah, so when we did pilot projects, what we did is we took a certain team within Cadence. We're a larger company, we're about 7,000 employees, and we took the team that is the most tech savvy and most friendly to new technology, and we had them run on a new system, so we were maintaining parallel systems. But we're literally processing thousands of contracts, and we couldn't afford to move off of it immediately. We wanted to make sure whatever we moved to was a huge improvement.
Very good, thank you. So I'll maybe turn to you, Mauro.
Sure.
So we hear often customers say, well, we're going to combine these 3 or 4 different repositories and get to something new, and maybe it's time to take stock and do a kind of giant cleanup.
Sure.
And of course, we as a vendor would want to respond to the needs as they come forward. But do you have any thoughts on, is this a good time to do a big audit kind of cleanup?
Well, certainly, most definitely. There's no better time to initiate that cleansing effort than as you're about to move to a brand new system. That's clearly going to impact the user adoption of the next system that gets implemented. Because let's face it, guys, at the end of the day, whether you're implementing Apttus or any solution, the clear challenge that we face in any initiative, particularly in CLM, is user adoption. And so to be able to provide a repository in which your starting point is a set of contracts that have been cleansed, that there's a level of trust that you've been able to develop, is going to garner a tremendous amount of adoption from the user base because they feel confident in being able to log in and either look for their contract and find it, or find their contract with the appropriate metadata. So clearly it's an excellent time in which to do that. And I want to also piggyback on what Barbara said with respect to business process and other areas that are just as important as part of any CLM initiative. One of the things that we espouse is the concept of a business transformation model. And I think as you're embarking on a new initiative, I think, again, we have an opportunity to take a step back and reflect on what worked and what hasn't worked, and looking at across the 4 components of process, governance or people, the technology, of course, and data being a very important component of this model, is where I think you'll start to see the benefits and how you're able to essentially derive insights on greater user adoption, but more importantly, align the system and so that it can behave with how users would expect the system to behave.
And I'd like to just add in on something that Mauro, you were talking about, which is talking about the audit, talking about the business processes. I think it's really important, especially as you're looking across an organization, to get the input of different folks. So for example, at Cadence, all of our contract management is led and sponsored by legal, but we also interact with finance, we interact with operations, we interact with the sales team. And what we did to help ensure that our processes are the most successful is bring those folks together.
Absolutely.
Because I don't know how the salesperson uses it, the operations folks don't know how the rest of us use it, but yet all together, coming together, we can get all of our different requirements. And that helps adoption, because not only are you now having one group that's sponsoring it, whether it's legal or another group, you have ambassadors that are also, they are also very interested in making sure their project is adopted.
Yeah, I mean, excellent point. And look, this is the opportunity, guys, in which you have now a chance to reinvigorate the CLM program. For whatever reason, it may have stalled, it may have hit and not gotten past the repository, as many of our customers were initially seeing. But as we work with them, and as Barbara alluded to, getting them back in the room again, understanding what's worked, working with them to define that future state, and getting them excited about what's coming is just as much of a change management exercise as anything else, as you're, of course, planning this program. But this is an opportunity to reinvigorate the CLM program, and that's what clients get most excited about.
And one more thing, sorry. This is great. One of the things is we typically think about who's handling contracts on a day-to-day basis,
Sure.
And those are the folks that are involved a lot of times in these CLM projects. But I think there's a missed opportunity of looking to the executive level for sponsorship, because one of the things we have seen at Cadence is by designing our system to make it easy to maneuver one way, you're driving behavior. You're driving the behavior that you want from the sales team. You're driving the behavior that you want from the finance team. And you can get buy-in from executive management with that, because they will see the value instead of being some sort of project that is small but important. They can see the value that's above and beyond just making the contracting process more efficient.
And that's why, guys, it's not just a cleansing effort that one would undertake as part of the migration to a new CLM solution. It's really looking at the data that's accumulated in the CLM environment and how to derive insights from that data. Your contracts today can tell you a lot of things about how fields are being inputted, what red lines are being made to your agreements, what approvals are still needed and required on a go-forward basis. That level of detail wasn't something that we could use or find in an easier way. Now with the advent of artificial intelligence and systems and utilities that we use, we're able to access that information and make that as part of the implementation even before you go live, which is powerful because now you're able to not just, again, move data from one system to another, you're making use of that data before you stand up your next CLM solution.
So given that there's a migration project underway, that there's presumably funding and support to do so, it can reinvigorate the access to senior management because they're the ones who supported the move in the first place. Is it a good time, do you think, to introduce radically new functions, mobile approvals or something simple perhaps, but are there other things that you would be ambitious about that you would counsel that make sense? Maybe Barbara?
Sure. I mean, one of the things I think it's important whenever you're looking to do a massive project like that, which any migration is very time and labor intensive. I think when at the end of the day, you don't want to just have migrated the old system to the new system. You want to do that value add because otherwise, it's a great project, but it doesn't really add to the business. The whole point of very powerful platforms is to not only make it easier to handle your contracts, but also add value to your business, understanding your operations better, get data about a part of your operations, the contracting process that you wouldn't otherwise have. And so if you do not implement some of these new processes or these new metrics, you're not going to realize the full value of the powerful platform that you've chosen.
Yeah, I mean, from our point of view, again, having worked with dozens of clients in helping them get started with their CLM process or move to migration, the new technology certainly is sexy, and it's certainly a way to bring momentum and so that users feel compelled to want to make a change. But the CLM principles around starting with a clean repository of data in which you can report on those contracts or search for those contracts and then conduct the necessary reporting as the basic first step of any CLM program is, again, is the first step of any successful CLM journey. Beyond that, as we start to look at ways in which our clients are able to work more effectively or more efficiently, easier and or smarter, is where the additional technologies that we're seeing today is what's really going to converge, so that ultimately what clients get to is the ability to be more agile. And so the first step as part of our contract maturity transformation model is, again, a very clean foundational repository in which we can start to pilot, as we talked about earlier, with some contract types and some of the bells and whistles that we're seeing in the Apttus solution today. But then beyond that, start to lay out a roadmap so that we're not overachieving, and that more importantly, we're aligned, as Barbara said, to the overall business objectives of the CLM program.
Mauro, are there any tools that are out there that we can talk about that you would recommend, third-party tools or other services?
From a contracts migration perspective, we work predominantly with Kira Systems. It's a utility that we find to be exceptionally of value for us to, again, not just help from a process of OCRing and digitizing your agreements into readable PDFs and extracting that data for cleansing purposes, but again, we're able to use the analytics within Kira in such a way that shows very clearly, very distinctively, where changes are made across templates, right, what the variations are between the various templates, and or agreements that have been signed, and how those agreements that have been signed, how they compare to the original template. How does that help us? Why is that interesting? Well, again, you're able to see where the red lines most often occur, so that you can start to look at your clause language library in such a way to say, well, what additional alternate clauses might we introduce that would make the negotiation and redlining process more expedient? And so that certainly helps compress and makes that contracting process more efficient. Other ways that we've seen it be more effective are with respect to the workflow approval rules. And what approval rules would you institute because changes are being made without legal's visibility before the contract is signed? And so understanding what some of those changes are enable us to validate the requirements that are in the design as we're implementing and configuring the application.
Thank you. Many customers have lots of other repositories which may not be viewed as integral to a CLM environment. So the statistics are that of legal artifacts, 98% in the United States, legal artifacts are held in other systems entirely. It could be from texts or other document management systems, email archives, and so forth. So that's a legal lens perspective, but it does point to that only 2% of that entirety of legal artifacts are contained within formal CLM systems. So, Barbara, do you see a migration as an opportunity to, at least at the repository level, maybe not in the document creation and so forth, but would you see it as an opportunity to build bridges and connectors to other repositories to help establish a more uniform line of sight to all of the various documents, at least, maybe more?
Yes. No, I think that's an excellent point, and I think one of the things you have to consider when you're looking at a migration is where are those documents and why are people using them where they are? Because presumably you've had the approved or the agreed upon area where they're stored, but if people are using other repositories, why? Why are they using other repositories? Is it because it was easier, because it was your system was too difficult to use, or your system was down? And getting to the root cause of that will help you not only pull the data in from the existing repositories, but help ensure that once you've implemented, that you will have people using the system, so you don't have the spaghetti of contracts.
It does reach into a broader records management retention policy type issue. So again, not dedicated to the needs of CLM, but if you're going to work with an open text or a Documentum, FileNet, and so forth, SharePoint, you're now having to adhere to whatever rules bounded those environments.
Right.
Have you had an experience with that, or is it something that would come in the future for you guys?
That's not something I have a lot of experience on. I'm wondering if Mauro, maybe you do.
I would say, a couple things come to mind, guys. Clearly, when you had sort of disparate different systems supporting and serving as sort of a repository for documents, if there's really no need for these many different systems, then I would perhaps consider and recommend the idea of a contract policy, contract management policy, where you're dictating essentially how and where the contracts get stored, right? And enforce the use of that tool. But then I go back to what I said earlier with respect to the emphasis of that first step of any CLM journey is providing a place, a repository in which all your agreements can be stored, accessed, and retrieved and reported on in an easier and efficient manner. And so providing that repository is integral to any CLM initiative. And that's why it's super important as you migrate and move from your existing environment to your new environment, to your new repository, that what you provide to your users is 100% trustworthy data.
Yeah. Do you find increasing focus from the GRC folks or others outside of the narrower world of CLM, relatively, do they have an opinion that you're seeing being enforced or pulled in?
Well, I think one of the things that CLM is often looked at, well, that's a legal thing to manage contracts. One of the things that we have particularly used it at Cadence for is beyond legal. And so we use it, for example, to track who has certain restrictions of what kind of data they can access. It's not really a legal issue, it's more of a management issue. And we use our contract management system to help track that, which is very different than just managing the commercial contracts. So because of that, we do see not only other groups outside of legal be interested, but other concerns that are coming in, like GDPR, as you were mentioning. Legal holds is another example. And employment issues all come because we've broadly implemented a contract management system to do things that traditionally it doesn't do. And so I think when you're looking at your project to implement contract management system, think about what are some adjacencies, what are some things that you could use it for, and think a little bit more broadly than just the commercial contracts or just the procurement contracts.
Yeah. There, on the planet, apparently there's roughly 4,000 laws that impact not just legal discovery, but just contracts in general. And obviously, we're familiar with Sarbanes-Oxley and others you just mentioned. 4,000 is a large number. So as a general trend, we know that the GRC issues are coming forward. If you're doing a conversion, that does actually introduce a little bit of risk in principle. This is in part a technical question as well as business process. Mauro, any thoughts on how to sort of contain the risk in a migration? making sure that the auditors are fully informed, that kind of thing?
Well, certainly. I think it's, again, when I introduced Kira as a utility that we use as part of the migration effort, the extraction results that we generate and see from Kira get us to about 85%. And so while it certainly provides a level of automation that makes the process happen faster, 85% trustworthy repository isn't going to get the job done, right, guys? That's clearly not going to build the level of confidence that your user base will expect to see. And so we employ a team of contract reviewers at Mainspring that eyeball essentially every agreement coming out of Kira to ensure that the extraction results are accurate, or if any additional translations are needed, are manually made, so that, again, the data going in is trustworthy. And that, I think, addresses some of the concerns around risk that we foresee by using both an automated approach and a manual approach, leveraging this team of contract reviewers.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that issue related to just project governance? You mentioned at the very beginning, of course, running a pilot and testing and so forth, but I think I'm reaching into the question of how do you make sure this thing doesn't go off the rails, and just make sure it's contained well?
Well, I mean, I think I'm going to answer your question a little bit differently than you expected, because I think what really is important is coming down to the trustworthiness of the vendor and the team that you're working with. And frankly, that's where most of your due diligence should be, and who you're picking as a partner, both from a technology perspective as well as from an implementation. Because frankly, I don't know how IT works. I'm a lawyer, and I need to have experts to come in to make sure that what we're doing is transparent. It has a high deal of fidelity, that we can trust the results. And that means that when you are looking at a partner, whether it's a technology partner or an implementation partner, that is where you can use those partners to help get you that level of trust. But that's where you got to spend your time as a business owner. That's where I focus my attentions.
Thank you. So Mauro, this is the tough question on how do you scale and price these kinds of initiatives. Are there any rules of thumb related to, say, X number of contracts, clauses? How do you sort of establish the taxonomy and inventory of how to cost it?
That's a great question. At the end of the day, it boils down to the number of contract types and the number of contract templates. That's still the sort of the foundational element of the scope that essentially determines how large an effort are we looking at for the CLM program. But again, given the advent of technology such as Kira, we're able to rationalize that number to a select few. So as your solution might have evolved to support a number of different contract templates and types, while the contract types might still remain the same, the number of variations in templates might be rationalized further. And so looking at the different variations across the templates and understanding whether or not alternate clauses can be used instead of another or separate new template helps contain scope and, of course, costs, and as well as the duration of a project. So minimizing scope in that matter is what I think helps contain and essentially helps us establish sort of a phased release approach where we're focused on a select number of contract types for phase one, and as we start to evolve into future phases.
There is, of course, a drive to offshore capabilities with the concept of it's 20 cents a document, that kind of thing. Any sort of reflections on you don't want a race to the bottom and the lowest possible cost, and it shouldn't necessarily be a function of how many documents do you have, but that is a typical question. And Robert, any thoughts on sort of?
I would have, if you ask me how many documents, I have no way of telling you.
Right.
And so it makes it challenging for us when we're working with somebody to ask, I get asked that question, I'm going to say I don't know. But that's what is really important in that process when you're selecting a vendor and an implementer, is to really make sure that you have an in-depth conversation and that you really show them what you're doing with your processes. I've had unpleasant experiences where we didn't go as detailed as we should have perhaps in the statement of work. We had one expectation, the vendor had another, and then we got about halfway through the project and realized we had a gap. So I would say that for those that are out there that are looking to do process, it is well worth your time up front to make sure that the person who you are, the company that you're working with, has a very clear understanding of what your processes are.
Yeah, That's a good build back to you, Mauro. Beyond just a conversion, you've done many hundreds of projects over the years, and any sort of wisdom on, from an implementer's point of view to a customer of better ways to work together or better governance?
Yeah, again, it's operating under the philosophy, and by the way, what she described with respect to the statement of work wasn't with Mainspring. So
That's
I just want to be clear about that.
That's right.
But you know what, guys, we're very much at Mainspring a believer and really espouse the philosophy of minimizing surprises. So again, we're not inclined to the extent that we can identify gaps up front with respect to the solution of choice, understanding the kinds of requirements that we typically see and the kinds of gaps that we've seen work at other clients. I mean, offering that up front and introducing those workarounds, introducing those potential areas of risk as it relates to the implementation is all part of our implementation planning process. And so, as Barbara mentioned, initiating this contracts discovery CLM strategy planning effort will really, although slow down in which the pace in which you start the implementation, there's a tremendous amount of benefit that can be derived by starting the right way. And certainly, we think a lot of time and headache saved down the road as you start with the CLM discovery, the strategy exercise.
And I just want to pipe in as being the business person that making the decision. My team is the beneficiary of the contract management. It can seem irritating at the beginning to spend all this time ahead of time. It's obvious what we want. Why doesn't the vendor understand? Why are we having to do it? And what I can tell you is it is time extremely well spent. Oftentimes you'll see IT departments want to jump right into implementation with the vendor. But really that process of understanding the business program, understanding the processes, understanding what the business needs are, that is the probably most important part of the project to make sure you have a good result at the end. So most of the time, the people that you're working with have other jobs. This is an add-on, they don't get to focus solely on this. And so I would say if you are part of that team that's helping implement contract management at your company, spend the time. It is well worth it, the result at the end.
And let's be clear, I mean, we're not just talking about starting a CLM discovery or strategy effort, going and pouring through Microsoft PowerPoint slides and or Word documents. This is an opportunity to introduce, again, some kind of proof of concept or pilot. Stand up an Apttus application, start configuring it in a small way, right? But enough that allows the users to really react to what they're seeing firsthand. So again, this is part of our CLM discovery. It doesn't have to wait for an entire implementation to be completed. We're able to do this in a matter of a few weeks to be able to at least start to configure the application so that your user base can really react to something tangible and solid and really see for themselves how this all kind of will come together and work together.
Mauro, you have a booth downstairs, I believe?
Absolutely, we do. So again, if you haven't seen our raffle for the drone, it's at the Mainspring booth. Obviously, besides the raffle, we're available to address any questions. I'm supported by my team of solution architect, configurators, project managers, delivery partners to be able to support any questions that you might have related to the implementation. So please do stop by. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for staying to the end. We have about 30 seconds left, but thank you very much, and thank you, Barbara and Mauro.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
Very good.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
you.